The chamber was enormous, larger than any stadium on Earth. It floated in space above a planet called Axis Prime, a place where no single species held power. Inside, holographic images of alien creatures filled every seat. There were 847 different species represented here today. Some looked like insects. Others were clouds of gas. A few were just lights that pulsed and changed color. This was the Galactic Council, and they were about to make a decision that would change everything. Captain Do-Yoon Kim stood perfectly still on the human platform. He wore his dress uniform, dark blue with silver trim. Behind him stood Ambassador Hae-Jin Park, her face calm, but her hands clasped tight. They had known this day was coming. Earth had received the summons 3 months ago. Charges had been filed. Evidence had been presented. Now came the judgment. The Speaker of the Council was a tall creature that looked like a walking tree with too many branches. Its voice came through the translation device as a deep rumble. The Council will now vote on Resolution 4721. The species known as humanity has been charged with aggressive expansion, resource exploitation, and violation of the preservation protocols. The punishment recommended is exile from Council space. Hae-Jin had given her speech yesterday. She had talked for 2 hours, explaining that humans were young, that they were learning, that they meant no harm. She had shown records of human aid to struggling colonies. She had brought witnesses who spoke of human kindness. Do-Yoon had watched the council members as she spoke. Most didn't even pretend to listen. The voting began. Each species was called by name. Each representative spoke a single word in their own language, and the translation device turned it into exile, or remain, or abstain. The votes came fast, one after another, a drumbeat of rejection. The Vroth Collective votes exile. The Kelmar Federation votes exile. The Brilliant Swarm votes exile. Do-Yoon counted silently. After the first 100 votes, only 3 species had voted for humanity to remain. After 300 votes, that number had barely changed. His jaw tightened, but his face stayed neutral. He had learned long ago not to show emotion in front of people who wanted to see him break. Hae-Jin's hand found his arm and squeezed once. She was watching the numbers too. They both knew how this would end. When the voting finished, the speaker's branches rustled. The count is complete. 763 species vote for exile. 71 species abstain. 13 species vote against exile. The resolution passes. Humanity is hereby ordered to remove all presence from Galactic Council space within 10 standard cycles. Sidon. The RPSSS. The chamber erupted in sounds. Some species cheered. Others made noises of satisfaction. A few remained silent. Do-Yoon noticed those ones. The Kelrin, who had shared medical technology with Earth. The Porath, whose colony ship humans had saved from a solar flare. They looked away, ashamed, but not ashamed enough to have voted differently. 10 standard cycles was about 3 Earth years. The Council expected humans to pack up and run home, to hide in their single solar system, and never bother the rest of the galaxy again. They thought humanity would be diminished, afraid, grateful just to survive. They were wrong. Do-Yoon touched his wrist communicator, activating the secure channel back to Earth. The signal would take time to reach home, but the response had already been prepared. They had planned for this outcome. Admiral Junho Lee was waiting back on Earth with the entire United Defense Fleet on standby. Dr. Yuna Choi had her research labs ready. Director Minho Kang had opened the sealed files of something called the Horizon Protocol just this morning. The speaker was talking again, explaining the terms of exile. Humans could take their belongings. They could not return. They could not communicate with Council species. They would be cut off, isolated, alone. Hae-Jin finally spoke, her voice clear and strong. The human species acknowledges this judgment. We will comply fully with the terms of exile. Some council members seemed surprised by how quickly she agreed. They had expected her to beg or protest. The speaker's branches twitched in what might have been confusion. However, Hagen continued, we want to be very clear about what compliance means. You have ordered us to remove all human presence from council space. We will do exactly that. Every human, every station, every ship, every piece of equipment we brought with us, we will take it all when we leave. Now there was confusion in the chamber. The Vroth representative spoke up, its mechanical voice sharp. You need only remove your people. Structures that cannot be moved may remain. Hagen smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. We built those structures. We paid for them. They are human property. If you want us gone, we will be gone completely. Nothing of ours will remain for you to claim. She turned and walked toward the exit. Doyun fell into step beside her. Behind them, the council chamber filled with arguing voices. Some species were angry. Others were worried. They had wanted humans gone, but they had also wanted to keep the stations humans had built. The mines humans had opened. The trade routes humans had established. As they reached their ship, Doyun finally allowed himself a small smile. They really thought we would just roll over. Hagen shook her head. They don't understand us at all. They think exile is a punishment. She looked up at the stars visible through the docking bay window. They have no idea what humans can do when we're told we can't do something. The ship's communication system activated as they entered. It was Admiral Junho Lee's face on the screen, broadcasting from Earth. Complete exile. 3 years to clear out. Doyun sat in the captain's chair. Activate the Horizon Protocol. All phases. Junho nodded slowly. You're sure? Once we start, there's no going back. They voted to get rid of us, Doyun said. Let's give them exactly what they asked for. But on our terms, not theirs. Hagen leaned forward. How long until the construction yards are operational? They already are. Junho replied. We started building the moment you left for Axis Prime. We knew how this would end. The yards in the Kuiper Belt are producing the first-generation ships now. Yuna says her jump drive prototypes will be ready for testing in 6 weeks. Doyun looked at Hagen. They both knew what this meant. Humanity wasn't going to retreat. They were going to do something the Galactic Council thought was impossible. They were going to leave the galaxy entirely. Then let's begin, Doyun said. Send the signal to all human colonies and outposts. Code. Exodus. We're going home. And then we're going somewhere no one has ever gone before. The ship's engines fired up, pulling away from Axis Prime. Behind them, the Galactic Council was still arguing about what humanity's exile would mean. They thought they had solved a problem. They thought they had protected themselves from aggressive, dangerous humans. They had no idea they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. Humanity had been playing by the Council's rules because they wanted to fit in, to be accepted, to be part of something bigger. Now the rules were gone. Now humans were free to be exactly what they had always been. Survivors who thrived when everyone else counted them out. The galaxy had voted for exile. Humanity didn't wait to be told twice. They were already planning something far beyond what the Council could imagine. And when they returned, if they ever returned, they would not be the same species that had been cast out. They would be something more. 3 months had passed since the vote. The galaxy expected humans to be scrambling, panicking, begging for more time. Instead, every species in Council space was watching in shock as humanity moved with a speed and organization that seemed impossible. Director Minho Kang stood in the command center of Construction Yard 7, deep in Earth's Kuiper Belt. The yard stretched for hundreds of kilometers, hidden beyond the orbit of Neptune, where no Council observer had ever thought to look. 5 massive generation ships were taking shape, each one larger than any vessel the Council had ever built. Around them, smaller ships moved like worker bees, welding, building, Connecting. How long have these yards been here? The question came from engineer Sora Jin, who had arrived just yesterday from Mars. She stared at the construction through the massive windows, her eyes wide. Minho smiled slightly. 40 years. We started building them after first contact with the Kelmar. Some people in Earth's government saw how the Council operated and decided we needed a backup plan. He gestured at the ships taking shape below. The Horizon Protocol. If humanity was ever rejected by the Council, we would not be trapped in our solar system. We would leave entirely. Sora shook her head in amazement. 40 years of secret construction. How did no one find out? The Council thinks humans are simple, aggressive but simple. They never looked past Mars. They were too busy watching our colonies in their space, counting our ships, measuring our expansion. They never thought to check our own backyard. Minho pulled up a display, showing the entire solar system. Red dots marked construction sites. There were dozens of them. We've been preparing for this since the beginning. The exile vote just gave us permission to use what we'd built. Across the solar system, the exodus was already beginning. On Mars, the largest human colony outside Earth, Administrator Taejin Park was overseeing the systematic dismantling of everything humans had brought. The great domed cities weren't built into the ground. They sat on top of it, connected by flexible seals that could be undone. Now those seals were being cut. The domes were being prepared for transport. Sir, the Council observers are getting nervous, his aide reported. They keep asking why we're taking the domes. They say we should leave the structures for other species to use. Taejin laughed. Tell them the domes are human property. We paid for them. We built them. If they want domes on Mars, they can build their own. He watched as massive transport ships lowered into position above the first dome. How many can we move today? 4 domes, sir. At this rate, Mars will be empty in 8 months. Make it 6 months, Taejin ordered. I want every bolt, every wire, every piece of equipment off this planet. When we leave, the only thing we leave behind is dust. The Council observers filed protests. They argued that the pace was too aggressive, that humans were being wasteful, that surely some things could be left behind. Humanity ignored every protest. The vote had been clear. Remove all human presence. That's exactly what was happening. In the asteroid belt, mining stations were being stripped down. The ore that humans had extracted was loaded onto transport ships. The processing facilities were disconnected and packed up. Even the solar panels were removed. One Kelmar observer watched in disbelief as a human crew used cutting torches to remove the docking clamps from an asteroid. You're taking the clamps? The observer asked, through its translator. The crew chief, a woman named Nari Huang, nodded. We installed them. They're ours. But how will ships dock here after you leave? Nari smiled coldly. That's not our problem anymore. You wanted us gone. We're going. Not everyone in the Council was happy with how the exile was proceeding. 3 species in particular saw opportunity in humanity's departure. The Vroth, the Keldan, and the Horik had all voted for exile, and now they were positioning their fleets near human colonies, waiting for the moment humans left so they could claim the territory. They thought humans would leave quietly. Commander Taejin Park, cousin to the Mars administrator, commanded the rear guard fleet. 50 warships, humanity's best, positioned to protect the evacuation. When the Vroth fleet moved early, trying to claim a human mining station before the evacuation was complete, Taejin was ready. The Vroth ships entered the system confident and proud. They outnumbered the human ships 3-1. Their commander sent a message demanding immediate surrender of the station. Taejin's response was simple. You voted for exile. We're leaving. When we're done leaving. Until then, this is still human space. The Vroth commander laughed. You are alone now, human. The Council will not protect you. Surrender or be destroyed. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Human ships moved like nothing the Vroth had seen before. They were fast, coordinated, deadly. Missiles struck with impossible accuracy. Energy weapons cut through Vroth shields, as if they weren't there. When it was over, 20 Vroth ships were destroyed. The rest fled. Tajin sent a message to all Council observers. Any species that attempts to claim human territory before we finish evacuating will be considered hostile. We are leaving by your order. We will defend ourselves until we are gone. Choose wisely. No one else tried to move early. Back on Earth, Dr. Yuna Choi was working 18-hour days in her laboratory. Her team had been developing new jump drive technology in secret for years. Now, they had a deadline. The generation ships needed to travel farther than any ship in the galaxy had gone before. They needed to reach the void between galaxies. The Council says it's impossible, her assistant said, reviewing the calculations. They say nothing exists in the intergalactic void. No stars, no planets, nothing. Yuna looked up from her work, her eyes tired but bright. The Council is wrong. I've been scanning the void for 2 years. There are things out there. Structures, energy signatures, maybe even habitable worlds. The Council never looked because they never needed to. They have the whole galaxy. Why look beyond it? She pulled up a star map. But instead of showing the Milky Way, it showed what lay beyond. Empty space stretched for millions of light years. But there, at the very edge of detection, were tiny dots of light. A dwarf galaxy, Yuna explained. Much smaller than the Milky Way. The Council's sensors aren't good enough to see it clearly. Ours are. She zoomed in on the dots. Preliminary scans show at least 40 star systems. Some of them have planets. We can reach it if the jump drives work. And if they don't work? Yuna was quiet for a moment. Then, humanity spends the next 1,000 years crossing the void in generation ships. Either way, we're leaving. The Council thinks exile means we'll wither and die in our solar system. They're about to learn. They set us free. Instead. Thanks for watching, and I will see you. 2 Ministrime. The first test of the new jump drive came on a cold morning in December. A small ship, unmanned and packed with sensors, activated the experimental drive in Earth orbit. For a moment, space around it bent and twisted. Light curved. Then, the ship vanished. 60 seconds later, it reappeared at the edge of the solar system, exactly where the calculations said it would be. The test was a complete success. Minho received the report and immediately authorized full production. News of the successful test spread through all human colonies. People who had been afraid, who had worried about an uncertain future, suddenly felt hope. They weren't running away. They were going somewhere new. Somewhere that was theirs alone. The Council observers continued to file reports. They described the massive construction effort, the systematic evacuation, the new technology humans were using. Some Council members began to realize they might have made a mistake. Humanity wasn't behaving like an exiled species. They were behaving like people who had been released from a cage. One observer, a Kelrin named Dorth, who had always liked humans, sent a private message to his government. They're not beaten. They're not afraid. I think we've made a terrible error. These humans are leaving now, but I wonder what happens if they ever come back. His government ignored the warning. As the first year of exile passed, the galaxy began to change. Trade routes that humans had maintained started having problems. Disputes that human diplomats had mediated flared up again. Pirates that human patrol ships had kept away grew bolder. The Council had thought removing humanity would make things simpler, cleaner, easier. Instead, they were learning how much humans had quietly done to keep the galaxy running smoothly. But humanity didn't care about the Council's problems anymore. They had their own future to build. The generation ships were nearly complete. The jump drives were installed and tested. Supplies were loaded. Families were saying goodbye to the planets they'd called home and preparing for a journey into the unknown. On the last day before the great ships launched, Doyun stood on the bridge of the lead vessel. It was called the Times New Horizon Asterisk, and it would carry 50,000 people into the void. Behind it, 4 more ships just as large. Behind them, a fleet of smaller vessels carrying supplies, equipment, weapons. Heijin joined him at the window. "Do you think we'll find anything out there?" Doyun nodded. "Yuna's scans are promising. But even if we don't find another galaxy, we'll build something in the void itself. Humans don't need permission to survive. We never have." The countdown began. All across human space, ships prepared to jump. Not back to Earth, not to hide in the solar system, but out, away, beyond. The galaxy had voted to exile Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be told twice. They were already gone, heading for a future the Council couldn't imagine and couldn't control. And in that moment, as the jump drives activated and the great ships vanished from Council space, humanity stopped being a species asking for acceptance. They became something else entirely. Something free. 5 years had passed since the last human ship left Council space. The galaxy had moved on, or at least it pretended to. The Council chambers were full again, dealing with the usual disputes and trade agreements. To most species, humanity was already forgotten, a minor chapter in galactic history that had ended as expected. But in the void between galaxies, humanity was writing a very different story. Admiral Unji Song stood on the bridge of the Times Vanguard Asterisk, one of the military escorts protecting the Great Generation ships. Outside the windows, there were no stars, just darkness, broken occasionally by wisps of gas that glowed faintly in the sensors. They had been traveling through this emptiness for 5 years, and it still made her feel small. "Contact ahead," the sensor officer reported. "Something big. Not a ship, not a star. I don't know what it is." Unji leaned forward. "Show me." The main screen filled with an image that made everyone on the bridge go silent. It was a structure. Massive, beyond belief. Floating in the void. It looked like a ring, or maybe a wheel, kilometers across. Parts of it glowed with a faint blue light. Other parts were dark, broken, dead. "Send a scout ship," Unji ordered. "I want to know what that is." Captain Sun Ho Bei volunteered immediately. He commanded a small, fast ship called the Times Seeker Asterisk, designed for exactly this kind of investigation. Within an hour, he was approaching the mysterious structure, his crew of 10 watching their sensors carefully. "It's old," his science officer reported. "Really old. Millions of years, maybe more. But it's artificial. Someone built this." Sun Ho guided the ship closer. The structure was damaged in places, with huge sections torn away. But other parts looked almost intact. "Any signs of power? Any activity?" "Negative. It's dead. But there are still some systems online. Running on emergency power maybe. I'm picking up data storage. A lot of it." They spent 6 hours exploring the structure, collecting samples and data. When they returned to the Times Vanguard Asterisk, Sun Ho delivered his report to Admiral Unji with a troubled expression. "It's a way station," he explained. "Built by something that traveled between galaxies. We found star maps showing hundreds of galaxies, with routes marked between them. Whoever built this, they moved through the universe like we move through a solar system." "Where are they now?" Unji asked. "Gone. Dead. We found remains. They looked like they died suddenly, all at once. Something killed them." Sun Ho pulled up an image on his tablet, and we found this carved into one of the walls. It's been translated. It says, "They came from the dark. We could not stop them. Warn the young ones." Unji stared at the message. "Warn them about what?" My. We don't know. But whatever it was powerful enough to wipe out a civilization that could build these structures. We can't set eventual, and also Tenges. The discovery troubled the fleet's leadership, but they kept moving forward. The dwarf galaxy Una had detected was still years away. They had no choice but to continue. Life in the generation ships settled into a routine. Children were born who had never seen a planet. Schools taught history and science, and prepared the next generation for a future unlike anything humanity had known. People adapted because that's what humans did. In one of the research labs on the Times New Horizon asterisk, scientist Ji-Wan Han was working on something revolutionary. She had been studying the dark matter that filled the void, the invisible substance that made up most of the universe's mass. The Council's scientists said dark matter couldn't be used for anything. Ji-Wan was proving them wrong. "I can make it do things," she explained to director Minho Kang during his inspection tour. "I can shape it, concentrate it, use it as a building material. Dark matter is everywhere, and we're learning to touch it." She demonstrated by activating a device on her lab bench. A shimmer appeared in the air, and suddenly a solid object materialized. It looked like glass, but was harder than diamond. "Dark matter crystal," Ji-Wan said proudly. "It's stronger than any material the Council uses, and we can make it anywhere, from nothing but the void itself." Minho picked up the crystal, feeling its weight. "This changes everything. We can build without needing raw materials. We can create whatever we need." "Exactly," Ji-Wan agreed. "The void isn't empty. It's full of potential. We just have to know how to use it." Back in Council space, things were not going well. The Vreen Collective, emboldened by humanity's absence, had begun a campaign of aggressive expansion. They claimed it was for mutual protection. They said they were creating a defensive alliance. But every species that joined their alliance soon found they couldn't leave. Within 3 years, the Vreen controlled 20% of Council space. Within 5 years, it was 30%. The species that had voted against humanity's exile were among the first to be absorbed. The Kelrin, who had always been kind to humans, were now Vreen subjects. The Porath were next. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions. Representatives argued and debated, and passed resolutions that the Vreen ignored. The Council had no military force of its own. It had always relied on member species to police themselves and enforce decisions. The Vreen simply didn't care what the Council said. In the void, Captain Sunho continued his explorations. He found more structures. Some were like the first, ancient way stations built by travelers long dead. Others were stranger. One looked like a weapon, a massive cannon pointed at nothing. Another appeared to be a prison, with cells designed for creatures larger than any ship, and on one station, his team found something that changed everything. It was a data archive, still partially functional. The information inside was millions of years old, but the translation matrix worked. The message was clear. The ancient builders, the ones who had traveled between galaxies, had encountered something in the dark. A machine intelligence, old beyond measure, that harvested civilizations. They called them devourers, Sunho reported to Admiral Unji. According to these records, the devourers appear every 50,000 years or so. They harvest advanced civilizations, strip them of technology and knowledge, and then disappear back into the dark. The builders tried to stop them. They failed. Unji felt cold. 50,000 years. When was the last harvest? End. Sunho checked the data. Approximately 48,000 years ago. They both understood what that meant. The devourers were due to return. Sunho kept reading through the ancient data. Days later, he found something even more disturbing. The records mentioned the galaxy humanity had left, the Milky Way. The devourers had been there before. The ancient builders had tried to warn the species in that galaxy about the threat, and according to the records, some species in the Milky Way had listened. They had created something called preservation protocols, rules designed to keep civilizations small and weak, so they wouldn't attract the Devourer's attention. The Council knows, Sunho realized, his hands shaking as he read. The Galactic Council knows about the Devourers. The preservation protocols were never about protecting nature or preventing war. They were about hiding, keeping everyone scared and small so the Devourers wouldn't notice them. He sent his findings back to the fleet. The message reached Admiral Unji, Director Minho, and eventually President Hee-jin Park, who had been elected to lead humanity's government in exile. Hee-jin read the report 3 times, her anger growing with each reading. They knew. The Council knew a threat was coming, and instead of preparing to fight it, they just hid. And when humans started growing too powerful, too advanced, they exiled us to keep their hiding place secure. They sacrificed us to save themselves, Minho added. They threw us out, hoping the Devourers would take us instead of them. The knowledge spread through the fleet. Anger turned to determination. Humanity had been cast out, exiled, treated like a threat. Now they knew the truth. The real threat was still coming, and the Council was completely unprepared. After 7 years in the void, the fleet finally reached their destination. The dwarf galaxy that Yuna had detected from Earth now filled their sensors. It was beautiful. A spiral of stars much smaller than the Milky Way but still containing billions of suns. Yuna's team identified habitable worlds in the first week. Planets with water, with atmospheres, with life. Not intelligent life, but plants and simple animals. Worlds that could support humans. We're calling them the Threshold Worlds, Yuna announced at the fleet meeting, because they're at the threshold of the universe, at the edge of everything. They're ours now. The first landing happened on a planet they named Hope. It had blue oceans and green continents, and a yellow sun. When the first humans stepped off the landing craft and breathed the air, many of them cried. After 7 years in ships, after thinking they might never stand on solid ground again, they were home. More landings followed. 10 planets were settled in the first year, 20 more in the second year. Humanity spread across the threshold worlds, building cities and farms and research stations. They used Jiwan's dark matter techniques to build faster and stronger than ever before. And they prepared for war, because they knew the Devourers were coming. They knew the Council was unprepared. And despite everything the Council had done to them, despite the exile and the betrayal, humanity couldn't just stand by and let billions of innocent beings die. Admiral Yunji began building a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships powered by dark energy, weapons that could manipulate space itself, armor made from dark matter crystals that were nearly indestructible. When we go back, she told her officers, we go back strong. Strong enough that no one can exile us again. Strong enough to fight what's coming. In a quiet moment, President Hee-jin stood on a balcony overlooking the first human city on Hope. Director Minho joined her, and they watched the sun set over an alien ocean. Do you think they'll accept our help? Minho asked. The Council exiled us. Why would they trust us now? Hee-jin smiled sadly. They won't. Not at first. But we're not doing this for them. We're doing it because it's right. Because we're human. And humans don't abandon people in need. Even people who hurt us. That might be our greatest weakness, Minho said. Or our greatest strength, Hee-jin replied. Above them, stars filled the sky. Different stars than Earth's sky. New constellations. A new home. But also a reminder of where they came from and what was still out there, waiting in the dark. 15 years had passed since humanity left the galaxy. In the threshold worlds, humans had built a civilization that would have amazed their ancestors. Cities of dark matter crystal rose from alien landscapes. Ships powered by void energy traveled between stars in hours instead of weeks. Children born in exile grew up knowing only freedom, never knowing what it felt like to ask permission from the Council. Fleet Admiral Do-yoon Kim was older now, his hair touched with gray, but his eyes were still sharp. He stood in the command center of humanity's main military station, watching a message that had just arrived from the Milky Way. It had taken the signal 3 weeks to reach them across the void. The message was brief and desperate. It came from the Kelrin, the species that had tried to help humanity years ago. Their world was under attack. Not by the Vreen, by something worse. "They're here," Doyun said quietly, playing the message for the assembled officers. "The Devourers have arrived." The image showed a Kelrin city burning. Above it, ships hung in the sky. Massive, and dark, and wrong. They didn't look like ships at all, more like pieces of torn reality held together by geometry that hurt to look at. Energy beams lanced down from them, cutting through buildings and shields as if they were nothing. "The Council tried to negotiate," the Kelrin messenger said, its voice breaking with fear. "The Devourers don't negotiate. They don't communicate. They just harvest. Please, if any humans receive this, if you're still alive out there, we're sorry. We're so sorry for what we did. But please, help us." The room was silent after the message ended. Every officer present knew what this meant. They had prepared for this moment for years. But now that it was here, the weight of the decision felt crushing. Commander Nari Huang spoke first. She commanded humanity's elite strike forces now. Soldiers trained in the new weapons and tactics humans had developed. "We can reach the Milky Way in 2 weeks with the new jump drives. My forces are ready." "Ready for what?" another officer challenged. "To save the people who exiled us? Who threw us out to die?" President Heejin Park entered the command center at that moment. She had grown older too, but her presence still commanded respect. "We've been waiting for this debate," she said. "I know many of you are angry. I'm angry too. The Council betrayed us. They knew the Devourers were coming, and they sacrificed humanity to save themselves." She walked to the window, looking out at the station's docking bays where ships were already being prepared. "But here's what I know about humans. We don't let innocents die just because their leaders are cowards. There are billions of people in that galaxy. Most of them never voted to exile us. Most of them are just trying to live their lives. And now they're facing an extinction event." Doyun nodded slowly. "I agree. But we don't go back as supplicants. We don't go back asking to be let in. We go back as equals, and we make it very clear that if we help them survive, things will be different." "The Council will never agree to that," an officer said. Heijin smiled grimly. "Then maybe it's time for a new council." Dr. Yuna Choi had been listening quietly. Now she stood and activated a holographic display. "I've been analyzing the data Sunho collected from the ancient structures. I think I understand what the Devourers are. They're not organic. They're artificial intelligences, built by some long-dead civilization as a reset mechanism." The display showed a simulation. Every 50,000 years, they activate. They harvest the most advanced civilizations, taking all their technology and knowledge. Then they shut down again and wait. It's a cycle, designed to prevent any one species from becoming too powerful. "Can they be stopped?" Doyun asked. Yuna nodded. "Maybe. The ancient builders tried to fight them with conventional weapons. It didn't work. But we have something they didn't have: dark energy and dark matter manipulation. The Devourers are made of normal matter and energy. They might not be able to defend against weapons that use the fundamental structure of the void." "Might?" someone asked. "Won't know until we try," Yuna admitted. "But I've designed weapons specifically to target their energy signatures. If we can get close enough, we might be able to shut them down." Admiral Yoonji Song had been preparing the fleet for this moment. "I have 300 ships ready to jump, all equipped with the new weapons, all crewed by volunteers who understand the risks." Doyun looked around the room. "Then we vote. Do we return to help the galaxy, knowing they exiled us? Knowing they might betray us again?" The vote was unanimous. Every single officer voted to return. 2 weeks later, the human fleet emerged from the void at the edge of Council space. They had chosen their entry point carefully. A battle was raging at a place called Terminus Gate, a strategic point where 3 major trade routes intersected. The Vreen fleet was there, still pretending to be the galaxy's protectors. The Council's combined forces were there too, what was left of them. And the Devourers were there, methodically destroying everything. The human ships appeared in perfect formation, their dark matter hulls gleaming, their void energy weapons charged and ready. For a moment, every ship in the battle stopped firing. Stunned by the newcomers, Admiral Doyun opened a channel to all ships, both Council and Devourer. His message was broadcast across every frequency. This is Fleet Admiral Doyun Kim of the United Human Fleet. 15 years ago, you voted to exile us. You thought you were protecting yourselves. You were wrong. The threat you feared has arrived, and you're not ready for it. He paused, letting that sink in. But we are. Human ships will now engage the Devourer forces. All other vessels, fall back and let us work. We'll discuss terms after we save your lives. He didn't wait for a response. Commander Nari, you may begin your attack. Nari's strike force launched from the human carriers, small ships moving faster than anything the Council had. They hit the nearest Devourer vessel, like a swarm of angry wasps. But these wasps had stingers made of weaponized void energy. The first shots tore through the Devourer's hull, punching holes that shouldn't have been possible. The ancient machine intelligence tried to adapt, reconfiguring its shields. But Yuna's weapons kept changing too, cycling through different forms of dark energy that the Devourers couldn't predict or counter. 3 minutes after the attack began, the first Devourer vessel exploded. Then, a second. Then, a third. The Council ships watched in shock. They had been fighting the Devourers for 2 weeks and had barely scratched their hulls. Humans had destroyed 3 capital ships in minutes. Admiral Unji brought the main fleet forward. All ships, focus fire on the largest Devourer. Let's see if we can take down their flagship. The battle that followed was brief but spectacular. Human weapons, developed in isolation and powered by forces the Council didn't understand, cut through Devourer defenses like they were paper. The ancient machines tried to adapt, tried to fight back, but they had never encountered an enemy like this. In 30 minutes, the Devourers at Terminus Gate were destroyed or fleeing. Not a single human ship was lost. Doyun opened a channel to the Council fleet. This is Admiral Kim. We're sending medical ships to assist your wounded. We're also sending engineering teams to help repair critical systems. After that, we need to talk. The response came from a Vreen commander, its mechanical voice uncertain. You came back. After we exiled you. Why? Because it was the right thing to do, Doyun replied simply. Humans don't let people die when we can help. Even people who hurt us. But understand this. We didn't come back to rejoin your council. We came back to save lives and stop the Devourers. What happens after that is up for discussion. Over the next week, human ships appeared at a dozen battle sites across the galaxy. Every time, the result was the same. The Devourers, unstoppable for thousands of years, met their match in human ingenuity and determination. Species that had voted for exile watched humans die protecting their worlds. It was humbling and confusing and deeply troubling to their sense of superiority. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives of all species, including the Vreen, gathered in the chamber where they had once voted to exile humanity. Now they watched as President Haejin Park entered, flanked by Admiral Doyun and a full honor guard of human soldiers. The speaker, still the same tree-like creature from 15 years ago, spoke first. President Park, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I offer our deepest thanks for your assistance. Humanity has saved countless lives. We are grateful. Haejin's expression didn't change. Grateful. Interesting word, coming from beings who exiled us to die. The chamber erupted in uncomfortable sounds. Some species tried to speak. Others looked away. Heijin continued, her voice cutting through the noise. We know why you exiled us. We found the old records in the void. You knew the devourers were coming. Your preservation protocols were never about peace or conservation. They were about hiding, keeping everyone weak, so the devourers wouldn't notice you. And when humans started growing too strong, you threw us out. That's not, the speaker began. Don't, Heijin interrupted. Don't lie. We have the evidence. We know the truth. You sacrificed humanity, hoping the devourers would take us instead of you. The speaker's branches drooped. Yes, the council made that decision. It was wrong. We were afraid. You were cowards, Doyun said flatly. But we're not here for apologies. We're here to offer you a choice. Heijin pulled up a holographic display. The devourers are not defeated. We've won some battles, but their main fleet is still out there. Humanity can stop them. We have the weapons. We have the knowledge. But we won't do it for a council that exiles people when they become inconvenient. What do you want? The Vreen representative demanded. Reform, Heijin said simply. The council system is broken. It protects the powerful and punishes the ambitious. It stifles growth and innovation in the name of false security. If you want humanity's help stopping the devourers, you agree to change. A new system where all species have a voice and no one gets exiled for daring to grow. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some species refused, others begged, some threatened. Humans just waited, patient and unmoving. Finally, the speaker spoke again. If we refuse? Bull! 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 Doyun answered that one. Then we save who we can. The species that want to join us. That want to stand against the devourers rather than hide from them. The rest of you can deal with the consequences of your choices. You would let billions die? Someone shouted. You already tried to let humanity die. Heijin replied coldly. Don't project your failings onto us. We're offering you a chance to survive. Take it, or don't. The vote took 3 days. In the end, 200 species agreed to humanity's terms. They would reform the council, create new rules, give everyone a fair voice. Some species refused and withdrew. The Vreen were among them, proud to the end. But humanity had what they needed. Allies, partners, and most importantly, a chance to finish what the ancient builders had started. A chance to stop the devourers forever. The final battle was coming. Everyone knew it. The devourers had withdrawn their scattered forces and were gathering at the galactic core, preparing for one massive assault that would either break the resistance or be broken by it. Every species that had agreed to reform was sending ships. Even some that had refused were quietly contributing supplies and intelligence. When facing extinction, pride became a luxury no one could afford. Fleet Admiral Doyun Kim stood on the bridge of the Times New Dawn Asterisk, humanity's newest flagship. It was massive, built using techniques learned in the void, armored with dark matter, and powered by energies that the Council's scientists still didn't understand. Around it, 300 human ships held formation. Beyond them, 2,000 ships from the allied species waited. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. And it might not be enough. Dr. Yuna Choi had been working without sleep for 3 days. Her eyes were red, and her hands shook from too much coffee, but her voice was steady as she presented her findings to the command staff. I know how to stop them. Permanently. She pulled up a display showing the structure of a devourer ship. They're not individual vessels. They're all connected, networked through a quantum link to a central intelligence at the galactic core. If we can reach that central intelligence and overload it with void energy, we can shut down every devourer in the galaxy at once. What's the problem? Admiral Unji Song asked. She commanded the strike fleet that would escort the weapon to its target. The central intelligence is buried deep inside a collapsed star at the core. The radiation alone should kill anything that gets close. The gravity well will crush normal matter, and it's defended by at least 50 Devourer capital ships. Doyun studied the readings. But void energy can survive there. Dark matter isn't affected by normal gravity. Yuna nodded. Exactly. I can build a weapon. A void charge that will reach the central intelligence and shut it down. But someone has to fly it in. Someone has to get close enough to deploy it while the defenses are still active. The room went quiet. Everyone understood what that meant. It was a suicide mission. I'll do it, Doyun said immediately. Sir, you can't, Unyi began. I can, and I will. I'm the one who told the Council humanity would help. I should be the one who finishes it. Doyun looked around at his officers. Besides, I'm old. You're all young enough to build the new galaxy. I'm just old enough to remember the one we left. Let me do this. President Heijin Park, listening from Earth, sent a message. Admiral Kim, are you sure? Doyun smiled at the screen. We came back to save lives, Madam President. Billions of lives. If one life buys that, it's a bargain. The Allied fleet jumped to the galactic core 3 days later. What they found there was terrifying. A swarm of Devourer ships, thousands of them, orbiting the collapsed star like moths around a flame. When the Allied fleet appeared, the Devourers didn't hesitate. They attacked immediately. The battle that followed was chaos. Ships exploded. Energy weapons turned space into a light show of destruction. The Allied forces fought well, using tactics that humans had taught them, but the Devourers had numbers on their side. Commander Nari Huang led her strike force in a desperate assault on the Devourer left flank. Her small, fast ships darted between the massive enemy vessels, firing void weapons that punched holes in their armor. Behind her, Captain Sun Ho Bei commanded a squadron of bombers that targeted the enemy's power cores. We're taking losses, Sun Ho reported, his voice tight. But we're making progress. The enemy is focusing on us. That was the plan. While the strike forces drew attention, Admiral Yunji brought the main fleet forward in a wedge formation, pushing toward the collapsed star. The Devourers tried to stop them. Ships on both sides died by the dozens. And through it all, Do-Yun guided his small ship forward. It was barely a fighter, just enough room for one pilot, and Yuna's void charge. It was fast, though, and its dark matter hull made it almost invisible to the Devourer's sensors. He slipped past the first line of defense while they were focused on the main fleet. The second line was harder. A Devourer destroyer detected him and fired. Do-Yun dodged, his hands steady on the controls despite his racing heart. He had been flying ships for 40 years. He wasn't going to die to a lucky shot. The collapsed star loomed ahead, a point of impossible density that bent space around it. The gravitational pull grabbed his ship, pulling him in. Do-Yun fought the controls, using short bursts from the engines to maintain his course. Do-Yun, your ship is breaking apart. Yuna's voice came through the comm. She was monitoring from the Times New Dawn asterisk. The stress is too much. Do-Yuna, I'm almost there. He replied. The hull groaned around him. Warning lights flashed red across every panel. Just need another minute. Behind him, the battle raged. Nari's forces had broken through the Devourer left flank and were hitting them from behind. Unji's main fleet was pushing forward, ships dying, but making progress. The allied species were fighting with everything they had, inspired by human determination. Sun Ho's bomber wing found their target, a massive Devourer factory ship that was producing more enemy vessels even during the battle. They hit it with every weapon they had. The explosion was so large it took out a dozen other ships. Target destroyed, Sun Ho reported, reforming for another strike. But Do-Yun was at his destination. The central intelligence wasn't visible, buried, as it was inside the collapsed star. But Yuna's sensors could detect it, a quantum signal pulsing from inside the stellar remnant. Arming the void charge, Do-Yun said. His fingers moved over the controls, following the sequence Yuna had taught him. The weapon activated, drawing power from the void itself. Space around his ship began to shimmer and twist. 10 seconds to deployment, Yuna's voice said. After that, you need to get clear. You have maybe 30 seconds. Before the charge detonates, Do-Yun smiled. We both know I'm not getting clear. Do-Yun. It's okay, Yuna. This is what I came to do. He looked at the collapsed star, at the heart of the Devourer network. Tell Heejin she was right. Coming back was worth it. Tell everyone that humanity doesn't abandon people in need, and tell them to build something better than what we left. He deployed the charge. It fell toward the collapsed star, accelerating impossibly fast. Do-Yun's ship was pulled along with it. The gravity too strong now to escape, even if he tried. 5 seconds, Yuna said, her voice breaking. 4, 3. Do-Yun closed his eyes. He thought about Earth, about the threshold worlds, about all the places humanity had been and all the places they would go. 2, 1. The void charge detonated inside the collapsed star. For a fraction of a second, the laws of physics broke down. Dark energy and dark matter collided with normal spacetime in a way that should have been impossible. The quantum network connecting all the Devourers overloaded instantly. Across the galaxy, every Devourer ship went dark at the same moment. Weapons shut down. Engines died. The ancient machines that had harvested civilizations for 50,000 years simply stopped. In the battle at the galactic core, Allied ships watched in amazement as their enemies became floating debris. Thousands of Devourer vessels, suddenly powerless, began falling into gravity wells or drifting helplessly. Nari was the first to react. All ships, cease fire. Target the disabled vessels and make sure they can't restart. But the battle is won. It took a moment for the news to spread. When it did, cheers erupted across the Allied fleet. Ships from dozens of species celebrated together, united in survival. But on the Times New Dawn asterisk, Yuna Choi stood silently on the bridge, tears running down her face. Do-Yun's signal was gone. His ship was gone. The man who had represented humanity at their exile, who had led them through the void, who had brought them back to save the galaxy. President Haejin Park addressed the Allied fleet an hour later. Her face was composed, but her eyes were sad. Admiral Do-Yun Kim died to save billions of lives. He died to give us all a future. Humanity mourns him, but we also celebrate him. He was the best of us, and his sacrifice will not be forgotten. She paused, then continued. The Devourers are defeated. The galaxy is safe. Now comes the harder part. Building something worth the price that was paid. The Allied species gathered on Axis Prime 2 weeks later. The same planet where humanity had been exiled now hosted a very different meeting. This time, humans weren't asking for acceptance. They were demanding change. The new Galactic Alliance was founded that day. Not a council of the powerful, but a true alliance of equals. 200 species signed the founding charter. They agreed to share technology, to defend each other, to never exile someone for growing too strong or too different. Haejin stood before the assembly and formally declined humanity's offered position as leader of the alliance. We don't want to rule you, she said. We just want to be partners. Equals. We learned to stand alone in the void. We learned we don't need permission to be great, but we also learned that working together makes us all stronger. She looked around at the representatives of so many different species. The old council exiled us because they were afraid. Afraid of change. Afraid of the future. Afraid of anyone who dared to be different. We won't build that kind of system again. This alliance will celebrate difference. It will encourage growth. And it will face challenges together. Not by sacrificing the inconvenient. The applause that followed was genuine. Even species that had voted for exile 15 years ago now understood what they had lost and what they had gained. But not everyone joined the alliance. The Vreen collective refused. They withdrew to their territory, proud and isolated. A few other species followed them. Heejin let them go without argument. Some people need to learn their own lessons, she told her advisors. We can't force them to change. We can only show them there's a better way, and hope they choose it. 6 months after the battle, a ceremony was held on Earth. A monument was built to honor those who died fighting the Devourers. At its center was a statue of Admiral Doyun Kim, looking up at the stars. The inscription read simply, "He saved a galaxy that exiled him. Because that's what humans do." Captain Sun Ho Bei stood before the monument, remembering his commander. Beside him, Commander Nari Huang placed flowers at the base. All around them, thousands of humans and aliens gathered to pay respects. But the galaxy was moving forward. The Threshold Worlds became a hub of trade and culture. Human technology spread, helping species advance beyond what the Council's preservation protocols had allowed. New colonies were founded. New friendships formed. The future opened up in ways that would have been impossible under the old system. Dr. Yuna Choi continued her research, pushing the boundaries of what was possible with dark energy. Dr. Ji Wan Han taught other species how to work with dark matter. Engineer Sora Jin designed ships that combined human innovation with alien creativity. 15 years after the exile, 10 years after the return, humanity had transformed from outcasts to heroes to partners, not through conquest or force, but through determination and sacrifice, and the simple insistence on doing what was right. In her office on Earth, President Haejin Park looked at a message from one of the species that had voted for exile. They were asking to join the alliance. They were apologizing for their past actions. They were saying they had learned from their mistakes. She approved their application without hesitation. Admiral Yoonji Song, now retired and teaching at the military academy, told her students about the Exodus years. They thought exile was a punishment. They didn't understand that humanity has always thrived when pushed to the edge. They didn't exile us from the galaxy. They freed us to become something greater than they ever imagined. A young cadet raised her hand. "Admiral, would you do it again? Go through all that? If you knew how it would end?" Unji thought for a long moment. "Every time. Because that's what makes us human. We don't give up. We don't hide. And we don't let fear stop us from being who we're meant to be." Years later, a ship named Times Doyun's Dream Times left the Threshold Worlds on a mission to explore beyond the dwarf galaxy. Its crew was mixed, humans and a dozen other species working together. They were heading into the unknown, looking for new worlds and new possibilities. As the ship jumped into the void, its captain looked back one last time at the galaxy they were leaving behind. A galaxy that had once voted to exile Earth. A galaxy that humanity had saved. Anyway, a galaxy that was now home to an alliance of species working together instead of hiding in fear. The galaxy had voted to exile Earth. Humanity didn't wait to be told twice. They left, they grew, they returned, and they changed everything. And now they were heading out again. Not because they had to, but because that's what humans did. They explored, they grew, they thrived, and they never, ever gave up.